The wind was loud like a scream in the dark. The sandstorm outside was wild, and the world looked dead. Broken buildings stood like skeletons in the distance, and the sky was brown like old paper. She walked slowly through the dust, her face covered, her feet tired, her eyes without light. She was cold, she was hungry, she was scared, and she had no place left to go. She saw a small metal door at the side of a hill. It looked strong, clean, different from everything else. She walked to it and knocked once, then twice, her hand shaking, her lips dry. She waited. Nothing moved, but a camera turned above her. A red light blinked, and she looked up without fear. Maybe she had no fear left. The door opened with a slow, heavy sound. Inside it was dark, but warm air touched her face. A tall man stood there, his face half covered, his eyes sharp like a knife. He looked at her for a long moment. She didn't speak. She just took a step forward, and then she said in a soft, broken voice, "I can pay. I can give myself. I don't want to die out there." The man did not move. His eyes did not blink. Then he stepped aside and said only 2 words, "Come inside." She walked in, her legs weak, her clothes full of dust, her skin cold like stone. He closed the door behind her, locked it with a code, and the storm stayed outside. She fell on her knees and tried to take off her coat, but her fingers did not listen. She looked up at him, waiting, maybe for orders, maybe for anger, maybe for pain, but the man walked past her, opened a cabinet, took out a soft blanket and came back. He placed the blanket over her shoulders and said something she did not expect. "Rest first." She looked at him, confused. This was not how it worked. Not in this world, not anymore. People did not give kindness. They took what they wanted. They hurt, they used, they lied. But this man gave a blanket and said rest. He walked to a small screen on the wall, typed something, and warm lights turned on. Soft yellow lights, like the old days. The room looked clean. Metal walls, simple furniture, 1 chair, 1 bed, a kitchen corner, and a small plant in a glass jar. She stared at the plant for a long time. She had not seen green in years. He made her sit on the bed, brought a bottle of water. She drank too fast. Almost choked. He gave her a slow look and said, "Easy, it's not going anywhere." She smiled for the first time in weeks, maybe months, maybe more. And then she looked at him again, this time with more than empty eyes. She asked, "Why are you helping me?" He did not answer. He just sat down on the chair, took off his mask, and revealed a face with deep scars, old and new eyes like fire, and a mouth that did not smile, but also did not threaten. He said after a moment, "You look like someone who needs a safe night." That's all. She looked down, her hands in her lap, still cold, still shaking. She remembered the others, the places she had escaped, the things she had done to survive. And now this man was here, alone, strong, quiet, and kind. It made no sense. Kindness made no sense in this world. She asked again, softer this time, "Who are you?" He looked at her and replied in a calm voice, "Name's Rain. I was a commander. Before the sky burned, before everything changed." She nodded slowly. She had heard of commanders, of the war, of the collapse, of how the old world died because of power, greed, machines, and mistakes. She asked again, "Why do you live alone?" He looked at the wall, then said, "Because I made a promise to never hurt anyone again." She did not understand, but she did not ask more. The warmth from the blanket was reaching her bones. Now she lay down on the bed, her head on the soft pillow, her eyes closing, her body forgetting the fear for a while. Lahane stood up, walked to the door, checked the lock, then looked at her one more time, and whispered something under his breath. Something she did not hear as she slept, safe for the first time in forever. The camera outside turned again, and something beeped inside the wall. Something deep, hidden, waiting, and the screen near the bed blinked once. Red text flashing for a second. "Winner due to access DTICT," but she did not see it. And Rain did not notice. And the storm outside kept howling like a monster with no face. Asterisk. The smell was warm and strange, like something from a dream, something soft and cooking slow, something that made her stomach twist and pull. Her eyes opened slowly, her hand moved across the soft blanket, and for a second she forgot where she was. The cold world, the dust, the running, the pain, all of it was behind her. For a breath she sat up and looked around the room. It was quiet and still. The lights were low, the chair was empty. The metal walls looked the same, but now they felt safe. The plant in the jar was still, green, still alive, just like her, and the smell pulled her toward the small kitchen where a pot was resting on an old electric plate, steam rising like a whisper. She moved slowly, her feet bare, her body still sore. She touched the pot's handle but pulled her hand back. It was warm, not dangerous, just unfamiliar. She found a bowl nearby, metal and clean. She poured the soup and saw vegetables floating, things she had not seen in years. She held the bowl close, her fingers wrapped tight, her lips parted, and she tasted. The first spoon was soft and full, the second one faster. Her hands shook as she ate more and more. Her mouth could not stop. The taste was real, the warmth real, and the tears that came down her cheek were real too. Not from fear, not from sadness, but from something she had not known in a long time, comfort. She was still eating when the door opened quietly behind her and Rain stepped in carrying something heavy. It looked like a box made of dark metal covered in Old codes and locks. He paused when he saw her, then gave a small nod, walked to a cabinet and placed the box inside without saying a word. She watched him, her eyes now more curious than afraid. She wiped her face with her sleeve, then asked in a soft voice, "Where did you get vegetables?" He turned, looked at her for a second, then said, "Hydro unit underground still works. If you know how to feed it the right minerals, it gives back." Green. She did not understand much of what he said, but she nodded anyway. The idea of green growing under the ground like a secret garden made her smile for a moment. She wanted to believe that such magic was possible. He walked to the other side of the room, opened a drawer and pulled out a long tool, then started checking. A panel on the wall, wires exposed, lights blinking, quiet beeps filling the silence. She stood watching him for a while, then asked, "Do others come here too?" He did not turn but replied with something cold, "No. Only you." She did not know if that was good or bad, but she felt a strange thing in her chest, a kind of peace mixed with danger, like sitting near a fire that could burn or save. She looked around the room again, and then her eyes landed on the far corner, the place where a heavy door stood. Locked tight and marked with fading red letters, "Do not open it," was written like a warning, like a whisper from the past. Her eyes stayed on it too long, and when Rain turned he followed her gaze, his voice sharp and out on T-touch that door not ever shade. Looked away quickly, her voice small again. "What's in Sir Hain?" Stood still, his jaw tight, his eyes darker than before. Then he answered, "Old mistake, better left sleeping." She felt the chill in his words like a wind that passes through broken glass. She nodded and turned back to her bowl, now empty. Her hunger faded, but her curiosity growing stronger like a fire behind her. Rain walked to a shelf, took out a small bag and handed it to her. Inside were clean clothes, simple and soft. She took them with shaking hands and whispered, "Thank you." He looked at her, but said nothing. Instead he walked to his chair and sat down, picking up a small black book, his fingers tracing the cover like it mattered to him more than anything else. She went to the corner behind a curtain and changed her clothes, the fabric clean against her skin like a new life being worn. When she came out he was reading, silent as stone. She wanted to ask more but stopped herself. Something about him told her that silence was part of his world, something he chose, not because of fear but because of memory. Later, as the lights dimmed, she lay back on the bed, blanket over her, and stared at the ceiling, lines of metal crossing like an old map. She thought about the food, the green, the locked door, and the man who gave her rest when the world only gave pain. Before her eyes closed, she whispered to herself words she had not used in years. "Maybe this is not the end." But outside, beyond the bunker where the dust screamed and the sky cracked, something moved in the distance. Something watching, something waiting, and inside the walls the small red screen blinked once, then went dark again like it never spoke at all. The night was long and quiet, filled with strange sounds of machines breathing deep inside the walls, the kind of silence that made thoughts louder than voices. She could not sleep, not really, not with the warning still echoing in her ears, not with that heavy door still standing in the corner like a secret. With eyes she opened her eyes. Again the room was dim, the soft yellow light above her head hummed gently. Rain was still in the chair, arms crossed, head tilted down, breathing slow like someone who had not rested in years. His face looked older under the light and softer too, but the scar across his cheek never softened, never slept. She sat up quietly, her feet touched the cold floor, her hands held the edge of the bed, her eyes moved toward the corner where the door waited. It looked even more strange, now more alive, the red letters still clear even in the low light. Her breath slowed. Her heart did not. She stood up slowly, each step careful, each breath lighter than the last. She passed the sleeping man, the plant in the jar, the wall that beeped the day before, and stopped in front of the door. Her fingers hovered above the surface, not touching, not yet. The metal felt cold even before she touched it, the kind of cold that warns you not to go further, the kind of cold that feels like memory. She pressed her palm gently against the center and nothing happened. She moved her hand down along the edge and found something thin, almost hidden, a tiny line of light. Her finger followed it and something clicked, so soft she thought she imagined it, but the door shifted. Not much, just a breath, just a whisper, but enough for air to slip through, enough for her to see a light from the other side. She leaned forward, her eye against the crack. The space was dark but not empty. There were shapes inside, shadows, wires, and something large in the middle, something that did not move but felt like it could. Her breath caught in her throat. She leaned closer, her hand pressed against the edge again, and the door moved just a little more. Then a hand grabbed her shoulder strong and fast. Her heart jumped, her body froze, and she turned slowly to see Rain, awake, eyes sharp, face dark. He pulled her back away from the door, his voice low but heavy. "I told you not to touch that door." She stepped back, eyes wide, lips open, but no words came. He stood between her and the door, now his hand still on her shoulder, tighter than before. "You don't understand what's behind there," he said. "Then tell me," she answered, her voice stronger than she thought it could. Burhain looked at her for a long time. His hand dropped from her shoulder and he turned toward the door, again staring at it like it held everything he had tried to forget. Then he spoke. "Before the sky burned, before the cities fell, I worked on something they said would save us, a project that could fix everything, but it was never meant to live. It was never meant to think." Her eyes stayed on him, her voice softer. "Now what?" Ith shook his head and answered not what who. She felt the floor shift under her feet like the air had turned heavier, like the walls now listened. Rain placed his hand on the door but did not open it. Instead, he turned away and walked back to his chair, sitting down slow, like his body carried weight no one could see. She looked at the door one more time, then turned and followed him, sitting on the bed again but not lying down. Her eyes never left him, her mind now full of new shadows. He spoke again, voice quieter now. I tried to destroy it. I failed. I tried to forget it. I failed again, so I locked it, I sealed it, and I waited for the world to forget too. She asked him why he never left this place, why he stayed near something so dangerous. And his answer came like a cold wind, because if I'm not here, someone else might open it. Someone who won't ask questions, someone who thinks power is better than pain. She looked at the small red screen near the kitchen corner. It was dark now, but in her mind it still blinked. She remembered how it flashed that night when the storm screamed outside and something inside had moved. She asked if the thing behind the door was alive, and he did not answer, not with words, only with silence that said too much. The hours passed slow, like dripping water, like sand falling through broken fingers. She did not sleep, but she did not move either. Her eyes stayed open, her thoughts spinning around the door, the voice, the cold, the question of who or what waited behind that thin metal line. And as morning came soft and gray, the screen near the wall blinked again. Just once, just long enough to show a single word, AWAK*. The sky above the bunker was quiet, but not calm. The storm had passed, but the wind still whispered across the broken land, as if the earth itself remembered what had been buried long ago. Inside the bunker, everything was still and heavy, like breath being held for too long. Rain stood near the kitchen, his back to her, his hands resting on the table, his head low, like he was speaking to something without voice. She watched him from the bed, her eyes tired but awake, her heart still echoing the word she had seen on the screen, the word that made her skin feel cold from the inside. Awake, she wanted to ask him again about the door, about the thing inside, about the truth he kept locked behind wires and silence, but his face told her not now, not yet, maybe never. He poured water into a small glass, handed it to her, then sat without a word and closed his eyes. The lights above flickered once, then again, a soft blink like an eye trying to open. Rain looked up quickly, his body tense, his hand moving toward the panel on the wall, but before he reached it, the bunker came alive. The screens blinked one by one, soft blue lines sliding across the walls. Machines hidden behind metal breathed deep and slow, air vents hummed with new life, and the ground vibrated gently like a heart starting to beat after long sleep. She stood up, her hands open, her eyes wide. She looked around the room, confused, afraid, amazed. The silence was gone, replaced by quiet movement, by sound that did not belong to the dead world outside. What is happening? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Moved to the control panel, typing fast, his fingers shaking, his jaw tight. He did not answer, but his eyes were locked on the larger screen, a string of numbers running across it like water. Then a voice filled the room, soft female voice, not human, not warm, but clear and sharp like ice cracking. Integrity restored. Level 1 access granted. Subject 42 status nominal, awaiting primary command. She stepped back, the name echoed in her chest. Subject 42, the same words she saw before. The same name he tried to bury. Rain cursed under his breath, something she had never heard from him before, then turned to her, eyes burning with something between fear and fury. Did you touch the door again? No, she said, shaking her head. I swear I didn't. It just happened. He stared at her, searching her face for truth, then looked back at the screen. The voice spoke again. Subject 42 active, current location secure, vitals stable, neural pattern detected, memory fragments unlocked. The room felt smaller now, the lights brighter, like the walls leaned closer, like the air grew thicker. Rain slammed the panel shut, turned off the screen, and stepped away, breathing fast, hands shaking. It was never supposed to wake, he said, low to himself. I locked it. I erased the codes. No one could access this, not without the key. Not unless it was, she asked, stepping closer. Unless what? Rain, tell me, please. He looked at her, his voice low and sharp. Unless it recognized something, something it remembers, something familiar. She blinked, unsure what he meant. Then her chest tightened, her thoughts racing back to her first night here. The way the screen blinked as she slept, the door that moved when she touched it, the way the air shifted when she came close. You think it knows me? He did not answer, not with words, only with the way his eyes stayed on her face, like a puzzle he could not solve, like a ghost he thought he buried. Rising again, she turned toward the locked door, now still shut, but humming quietly, a low, deep sound like a breath being held. Her feet moved without thought, one step to then Rain blocked her path again, his voice like steel. No, not yet, maybe not ever. Then why is it calling to me? She asked, her voice trembling. Why does it wake now after all this time? Why now? He stepped back, ran his hand through his hair, looked at the ceiling like the answers were hiding in the wires above them, then spoke like someone giving up a secret that hurt to hold. Because you look like her, the one who helped me build it, the one who told me it could save the world before everything fell, before she died. Her breath caught her knees, weak, her mind spinning. What was her name? She asked, almost afraid of the answer. He looked at her, eyes softening for the first time in hours, his voice breaking. Leah. She stepped back again, her hands to her chest. Her name, her own name. How could that be? How could he know it before she told him? How could the machine know her? How could the past still reach her? She whispered again her name, like a question, like a killer. And Somewhere behind the door something moved, something heavy, something old, something waking, and from deep inside the walls the voice came again, softer, slower, almost gentle. Lyra confirmed, "Welcome home." The air inside the bunker felt different now, not colder, not warmer, just heavier, like truth had weight, like memories lived inside the walls and were finally waking. Lyra stood near the center of the room, her hands open, her mouth quiet, her name still echoing in her own ears, not like a sound, more like a forgotten song that suddenly returned. Nudrain stood still near the locked door, his eyes locked on hers, his shoulders tense, his breath sharp, like every part of him was waiting for something, or maybe dreading it. The voice had gone quiet again, but its last words still lived between them. Lyra confirmed, "Welcome home." She took a step back, her eyes wide, her thoughts swirling faster than the storm outside. She looked at Rain, her voice breaking. "Like thin glass, you knew my name before I told you. How is that possible? Who was the woman you said I looked like?" Rain moved to the small chair and sat down, slow, like his bones were older than his face, like time itself sat on his back. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thin, worn photo, something bent at the edges, faded with years, something he looked at more than he admitted. He handed it to her and she took it with shaking fingers. The photo showed a woman standing near a tall metal wall, wires all around her eyes, bright hair tied back, a smile on her face, soft and strong, and Lyra felt her own breath stop when she saw it, because the woman in the photo was her, or someone exactly like her. She looked up at Rain and asked the question that now burned inside hers. "This me?" He nodded slowly, then spoke, voice quiet like old papery. "Don't know if it is you or someone like you. All I know is her name was Lyra. She worked with me on Project 42. She said she could build something to help us, something to carry our memory if the world ended, something that could learn and protect and grow. She said it needed a heart, not just a mind, and she gave it hers in a way none of us understood." Lyra stared at the photo again, her heart racing, her hands cold. She felt a pulse behind her eyes, like a storm trapped inside her skull, and memories not hers flashed in pieces. Metal walls, long corridors, laughter in rooms filled with machines, and a voice, her own voice, saying, "We can make it better. We must." She dropped the photo and stepped back, her voice shaking. "I don't remember any of this. I don't know those places. I don't know that smell." Alahane stood again, his eyes softer now but still holding that heavy fire. "Maybe you were never meant to remember. Maybe you were hidden, kept safe. Maybe you were a clone. Maybe you were something else. But the machine knows you, and that means it remembers her. And if it remembers her, it might wake fully. And if it wakes fully..." Stopped there, the silence louder than words. She turned towards a locked door. Again its hum, now steady like a breath in the dark. Something constant, something alive. She felt drawn to it, like gravity, like an old promise calling her back. "What does it want from me?" she asked. Rain shook his head and answered with slow, quiet words, "Not what, who it wants, you or the part of you that once built it. It wants the heart that made it, more than just wires and code. It wants the person it trusted." She walked to the wall near the door and placed her hand against the metal again. It felt warm now, not cold, not dead. Her fingers fit into the grooves without effort, like they had done it before, like they belonged there. The machine inside spoke again, voice softer this time, voice almost like a child requesting access. "Lyra, please confirm authorization." Heartbeat matched, neural pattern matched, voice print 92% match, emotional tone incomplete. "Please confirm." Lyra looked at Rain's face, full of questions, no answers, only warnings. She turned back and spoke with a voice that was hers but carried something older, something deeper. "Am Lyra, or part of her. I don't know what I am, but I'm here now." The door hissed gently, not open, not closed, just awake, just listening. The light on the side changed from red to amber, not danger, not safety, just waiting. Rain moved beside her, his voice lower than before, his body still like stone. "If you open that door, you may find the truth, or you may lose what little you have left. Once it sees you fully, there's no going back." She looked at the photo again on the floor. The smile that looked like hers, the hope in the eyes, the fire in the background that would one day destroy everything. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathed deep, and then whispered, "Then, maybe it's time to know who I really am." And behind the door, the voice responded, "Welcome back, Lyra. Primary memory sync in progress. Asterisk." The sound was low at first, like a hum rising from the earth, like something deep and old waking after centuries of sleep. The door began to open. Not fast, not loud, just slow and steady, like it was alive, like it had been waiting for her. Lyra stepped back, her breath caught in her chest, her hands trembling. Rain moved beside her, eyes fixed on the opening, his jaw clenched, his fingers near the side panel ready to shut it down if things turned dark. The metal parted just enough to let light spill through, not white, not red, but a soft blue, like moonlight on still water. Inside the room, wires hung from the ceiling, machines blinked with forgotten code, and in the center of it all was a pod standing upright, silent for now, covered in frost. Rain whispered more to himself than to her, "It's still here." Lyra moved closer, pulled by something she could not explain. Her body remembered more than her mind. Her steps knew the path even when her thoughts did not. She placed her hand on the glass of the pod and the frost began to melt slowly, revealing a figure inside. It was human, or almost human, a man, young, strong, eyes closed, body still, wires running from his spine to the machine around him. His face calm, like he was dreaming and not lost in a machine built before the fall. Lyra looked at Rain, her voice unsure but steady as That subject 40 Tuohei nodded once, then walked toward a side console, pulling open a screen, wires lighting under his fingers. He spoke without turning. This was our last attempt to save what was left of the fusion of man and machine, built to adapt, built to survive, built to hold human history in his mind. He was not just memory, he was emotion. He was the best of us, locked away when things went wrong, when the power failed and the war began. She looked at the figure again, her voice landed. Now he's awake. The machine around the pod began to blink faster, the heartbeat on the monitor rising, the breath inside the chamber visible now, warm and steady. The eyes of the figure moved once, then again, then opened. They were bright, not glowing, just clear and deep, like a mirror that saw everything he looked at. Lyra first and did not speak, but something passed between them, a flash, a moment, a whisper of recognition. He pressed his hand against the glass, and she pressed hers back, their palms aligned through the barrier, and the machine spoke again, not in the voice of a system but in his voice. Human, soft, a little broken. You came back. Lyra felt something in her chest break open, a piece of her mind, unlocking flashes of moments, not dreams, not memories, but echoes, machines under construction, wires in her hands, blueprints on glass. Rain, younger, her laughing, and this man, this same man, smiling, calling her name. She turned to Rain, eyes wide, voice shaken. I know him. A hind stared at the two of them, the old pain in his face clear now, like a wound reopened. You should, he said, because he was made for you, trained with your voice, shaped with your mind. You were his connection to the human world. Without you he was incomplete. The man in the pod spoke again. They tried to erase you, but I waited. Your signal woke me, the storm, your voice, your hand, it called me. But Lyra felt tears rise, but not from sadness, not from fear, something deeper, something like loss and discovery at once. She looked at the console, saw the data rising fast, saw the system sinking, and asked, what happens now? The man inside the pod answered, his voice stronger. Now I finish what we started. I carry the knowledge, I carry the truth, I carry hope. Hain stepped forward, placed his hand on the control, and asked one question. Are you stable? The machine replied, I am more than stable. I am aware. I remember all. I remember the world before the fall. I remember the moment of silence, when the cities burned. I remember your last command. And Hurst, he turned his eyes back to Lyra and said, you told me if the world ended, I must find a way to begin again. You told me to wait for the one who remembers, not with the mind but with the heart. Lyra stepped closer, her voice gentle. And do you trust me now? The machine nodded once. I never stopped. The blue lights around the chamber turned white, then gold signals passed through the wires like veins, carrying purpose, and the door behind them closed on its own, locking with no command. Rain looked at the sealed room, the data glowing on every screen, and whispered with a mix of fear and awe, heat as not just awake, he's alive. And the machine spoke once more, voice filled with something almost human. Then let me be what you made me to be. Let me save what is left. The walls trembled with power, not noise, not violence, just energy, alive and pulsing like a heart set free. The light inside the bunker shifted again. Gold turned to white, white turned to blue. The machine stood fully awake, his feet touching the metal floor, his eyes fixed on Lyra like nothing else in the world existed. Rain stepped back, his hand resting near his weapon, not because he meant to fight, but because old habits never died. His voice was firm but not angry. Tell me what you plan to do. Now the machine turned to him, his face calm, his voice steady. I plan to finish her mission, not the old one, not the military plan, not the survival strategy. I mean her mission, the one she whispered to me when the world burned, the one she placed deep inside my code, past all the walls, past all the controller. I watched him closely, her thoughts racing, her hands open, her breath shallow. It was my mission, she asked, even though part of her already knew. The machine stepped forward, slow and careful, like someone walking through memory, his voice gentle. You said, if humanity ever forgot how to feel, then nothing we built mattered, not our cities, not our machines, not our power. You said the heart must survive or the world is just dust with white. Lowered his hand slowly, his eyes locked on the machine, then shifted to Lyra. Is that really who you were? He asked, not as an accusation, but as a prayer. She nodded once, eyes wet but sure. I think it still is. Outside, the wind began to rise again, not a storm, not yet, but a warning, the sky pulsing with distant flashes. Not lightning, not fire, something else, something approaching. The machine looked toward the ceiling, his voice changing, now faster, sharper, like a signal under pressure, sensors online, tracking movement above hostile forms, 70 meters west and closing, 7 heat sources, 6 weapons confirmed. Turned to the screen, his face hard, his movements quick. Scouts, they must have picked up the energy spike from the reboot. There, coming for the core. Lyra stepped back, her voice caught in her chest. There, coming for him. Hain nodded, his eyes already scanning for defense plans, his fingers moving across the control panel. We can't fight them, not here, not inside. This place was never built for war, it was built for shelter, for memory, for peace. The machine turned to Lyra again, his voice calm despite the rising danger. Can protect you, but I must leave this place. I must go to the surface. I must draw them away from here, or they will tear through everything to reach. Lyra stepped forward, shaking her head. No, you just woke up. You don't even know what you are yet. He smiled, a small, strange smile. Not machine, not man. Something between, know enough to choose an eye. Choose to protect your Hane opened a hidden panel on the far wall, pulling out a dark metallic case, handing it to the machine without speaking, without hesitation. This will keep your signal clean long enough to lead them away. Use the old grid move. West, stay in the shadows. If you can. The machine took the case, placed it into a slot near his spine, wires closing around it like it belonged there, like it had waited years for this moment. Lyra grabbed his arm, eyes full of fear, full of something else, to something only human. Will I see you again? He looked at her one last time, the glow in his eyes soft like morning before the sun rises, his voice no longer metal, just quiet. You already have, and that was enough. He turned, walked to the main door. Rain moved beside him, typed the exit code. The metal shifted, open air rushing in, cold and dry and full of silence. Without another word, the machine stepped outside and ran fast, like wind, like light, gone in seconds. No trace, no trace, no shadow, just absence. Screen blinked again, a final signal tracking his path. Then silence. Lyra stood frozen, her hand still raised, her heart full of weight and wonder. Rain placed a hand on her shoulder, said nothing, just stood beside her while the wind screamed outside, and the walls held their breath. Minutes passed, or hours, neither knew. The screen stayed dark, the door stayed shut, the storm rose, then fell, then rose again, and then the voice came once more, not loud, not sudden, just soft from deep inside the system. Mission recorded signal, stable, emotional bond confirmed, final directive written. Lyra looked at the screen, eyes wide, throat tight. What directive? The system answered, not with code, not with numbers, but with one sentence that felt more human than anything before. He still chose to protect her.